Hello everybody, today I am driving this, the 2022 BMW M135i xDrive, a car considered by many to be the greatest automotive insult since Subaru said, "Blue with gold wheels, who on earth would want that?" The reason being that this car's predecessors, the M140i and M135i, offered something genuinely unique to those looking for a hot hatch. But for the third generation 1 Series, BMW was so keen to throw out baby with bathwater that I don't actually know a single person who owned one of the old cars that wanted one of the new. And yet, everybody I know who has actually sampled this car says it's got quite a bit to offer. So then, what exactly is it that BMW got so tragically wrong, and does the M135i really have something to offer in its place? Well, let's find out on today's exciting episode of JAYEMM on Cars. The last decade has seen an awful lot of manufacturers have to give up a number of principles, and I think really BMW should be commended for having stuck to theirs for as long as they did. In the case of the 1 Series, what I'm talking about is that combination of a beautiful straight-six engine and rear-wheel drive, which in the hatchback segment was a unique proposition. We all knew they were imperfect beasties. The combination of the styling with the longitudinally mounted 6-cylinder engine meant the packaging was always compromised, and so, compared with their rivals, they were always quite a bit tighter inside. They were also, thanks to the rear drive element, a bit of a handful, even in the dry, and certainly in the wet. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, and so was the case for the M140i and all of the second generation 1 Series when it was retired in 2019. Its replacement being this, the F40. And the big news for this third generation car was that BMW decided the platform was to move to front wheel drive. As you've probably noticed already, the M135i is actually now all-wheel drive as standard, to help soften the blow. But to add salt to the wounds of their fans, BMW's change of layout also meant the loss of the M140i's other USP, its silky smooth straight-six engine, a BMW icon. Instead, the flagship 1 Series now has to make do with a turbocharged 2-litre 4-cylinder, just like every other hot Golf, Audi S3, Honda Civic, Hyundai i30N. And for dedicated BMW fans like myself, this was a move nothing short of heresy. As far as we were concerned, they'd gone and bought a whole other brand, Mini, just so that they could make front-wheel drive cars without having to dirty the BMW name with such affairs. The story goes that BMW did a little bit of market research, and what came back was that most 1 Series customers had no idea their car was rear-wheel drive anyway. So they figured, well, what's the point? And the move to front-wheel drive certainly brought quite a few benefits, including the fact that this new car, though smaller on the outside versus the outgoing one, is bigger on the inside. And you do notice it. Though I have to say, it is a rather generic-looking affair. More disappointingly for me is the fact that you really wouldn't know this was the M135i. If you compare it to the most basic car in the lineup, the 116, doesn't really look all that different. In comparison to the amazing transformation you get with, say, an M3, it's a really very subtle affair. As it happens, that appeals to this car's owner Cameron, who didn't want the likes of an RS3 or a Golf R because of the sometimes unwanted attention that they can bring. For him, this is the perfect personification of understated performance, and though he's had your regular classic sports cars like a Porsche Cayman in the past, practical needs meant he had to get something a little bit bigger. He actually started a few years ago with a 116, the very last of the second generation cars, but he didn't get on with that at all. As soon as this was announced, he thought, you know what, that sounds like a good idea. put his order in, but then wound up waiting 16 months to get his hands on it. Unfortunately, supply chain issues also meant that though he was buying the car from new, his choice was actually very limited. Quite a few options were not available, including the upgraded stereo, the wireless charging port, some of the interior lighting, the heads-up display, and a few other options too. So this really is almost as basic as an M135i can come. Not that there are loads of options to choose from. If you head onto the BMW website, you'll see that really your choice is exterior colour, interior, wheels, and that's about it. I am happy to see you can now have these apparently in a BMW individual colour, which previously was not possible, but beyond that there isn't really much in the way of personalisation. This car is in the whatever they call it grey, and honestly I don't care because I'd never spec it, but it looks alright, I suppose. The interior is black leather, the other choice being red, and he tells me that he does regret not having gone for the red because it would have livened the place up a little bit. Overall, it's actually a very, very nice thing. It does feel like a slightly shrunken down version of a 3 Series. Really nice and high quality, and personally much rather the layout of this interior versus, say, the equivalent Mark 8 Golf, which really was a bit of a design misstep with its capacitive, touch-sensitive buttons on the wheel, and nobody liked that, did they? This is classic BMW, and if anything it's got a lot more buttons in it than I'm used to with most other modern cars, but the good news being, though it has touch screens, I don't need to touch them. Instead, I can control everything from the little iDrive selector down here. In terms of specification, the naming of this car should give you a little bit of a clue, because historically BMW's numbers have been creeping up for quite some time, and now the number you get with a model has almost nothing to do with the capacity of the engine. 30 years ago it did, but that hasn't been the case for a long time. In any case, the choice to replace the 40 branded car with a 35 one matches with the fact the performance here has actually taken a small step back. So this has 306 horsepower and 332 pound-foot of torque. That's 450 newton meters. In both regards, about 10% down on the old 140. The weight has remained the same at a rather portly for this category 1,550 to 1,600 kilos, the loss of those 2 cylinders at the front being offset by the adoption of all-wheel drive, here branded as xDrive, a system which can deploy the torque as it needs. Don't forget, if today's video has you headed towards the classifieds, to use CarVertical, the super-powered super search that cross-references a number of databases from around the globe to give you all the information you want to know on any potential used car purchase, from whether a vehicle may have been stolen, written off, or simply damaged without a cat marker being put against it. A CarVertical report has it all, and it's been recently reworked to be even easier than ever before to read. To get one, you need just 60 seconds and either a VIN or registration number, and even better, for 10% off the service, don't forget to use my discount code JAYEMM. Over the years, the car has been in production. A few changes have been made, including a couple to the suspension. Though I don't know the specifics, I can tell you, this being a 2022, it has all of them. It also has 18-inch wheels on it, which are the ones I'd go for, but does not have adaptive dampers. This car has been set up, as I think just about everybody does, with the steering in comfort, so it's not too weighty, but the engine and gearbox in sport. The gearbox is another area of controversy/interest, because where many old-school performance BMWs had a twin-clutch box, this has an 8-speed automatic. But unlike many others, including the M3 and M4, it is not the venerable ZF. Instead, it's a unit supplied by Aisin. That's Toyota to you and me. At lower speeds, the ride does have a little bit of choppiness about it, but it's what I'd expect in a more performance-orientated German hatch. It's certainly not terrible. I should, though, on that front point out the fact that this particular test route I use has been largely resurfaced, and some of the particularly poor sections are now racetrack smooth, which is wonderful to drive on, but as a test route does give me a few issues, because those were great sections for working out just how good or bad a suspension was when it was being thoroughly tested. They sadly are no more. At your sort of normal, boring, sensible town speeds, I'm currently doing 35 miles an hour because I can. The gearbox is okay, nothing more. The throttle and brake are responsive enough. Cameron tells me he does have issues with the brakes on occasion and finds the gearbox a little lethargic, but thus far it's been pretty good to me. You're not here to find out how the car behaves at 30 miles an hour though. Instead, you want to know what it's like when you put the hammer down. And so do I, because that really is the true test of any hot hatch. If it can't raise a smile, then frankly, it's just not worth it. And this, at, are you ready, £42,000, needs to produce a fairly significant smile, I'd say. Right, sport mode it is, shift over for manual, and let's go. I gotta be honest with you all, this car is a real disappointment. It's very capable, but only to a point that just about anything modern should be. The engine is decent enough. Yes, the old B58 was fantastic, but this B48 is essentially just 2/3 of that old engine. You can feel the fact that the turbo is now having to work all that harder, but still, it does the business. In sport mode, the rather garish pops and bangs I think are a very un-BMW thing, and I'm just not a fan of them. But the power plant itself, actually, I've no real issue with. The gearbox is a little trickier to evaluate, because while you can tell it certainly changes quick enough, the response to your inputs just isn't good enough. Let me demonstrate. So downshift, there it is. Downshift, there it is. Really weirdly, the lower powered variants of the 1 Series, if you go for an automatic, will actually have a DCT. There is now no longer a manual option available for the M car, so this is the one and only gearbox you're ever going to get. And that being the case, I think BMW should have tried a little bit harder. The real frustration though, that's the chassis. I knew this wasn't going to behave like the old car. That's fine, I am at peace with that. But when you then produce a car which has a 2-litre, 4-cylinder, heavily turbocharged engine with all-wheel drive, you set a very particular benchmark. In this case, the likes of the Golf R, the Audi S3, the Mercedes A35, to some extent the A45, and of course the likes of the GR Yaris too. For a petrol head in particular, that's a car you cannot ignore. This, and I'm struggling to work out why, just feels confused. At about 20-30 miles an hour, there was the aforementioned choppiness. Then you get to about sort of 40-50 or so, and it does begin to make a little bit of sense. Before then, when you get to about 60-70 miles an hour, all falling apart. Kind of like the old car actually did, but we forgave it because it was just such a nutty, wonderful thing. This instead just feels like the front and rear of the car aren't communicating. I should point out the fact that presently this car has mismatching tyres, so up front we have Michelin Pilot Sport 5s, and at the back we have a set of Bridgestones. Even so, I'm not sure that's really responsible for what I'm feeling. The steering in particular is so annoying because it's really quite inert, and I'm sure I read a few reviews that said it was decent. Just in the interest of science, I'm going to put it into full sport mode, so steering in sport as well, and see if that improves things, but no it doesn't. It just sets it in treacle. Look at this, the whole car is just off. It's really, really off. My 130i was a member of the first generation of 1 Series, and that was, again, a wonderful car, but also deeply flawed because it couldn't work out whether it wanted to be comfy or sporty, and there were a number of compromises that meant it wasn't really either or. This feels like it's essentially adopted the exact same chassis. It just doesn't work. BMW, how'd you get this so wrong? The current M3 and M4 are actually annoyingly good. This, nope. There is no smile here at all. I mean, just look, if you want an ordinary, usable, day-to-day proposition, you may as well just go and get yourself a Golf R. It's going to be just as decent. I haven't tried the current generation Merc A35 or A45, so I can't tell you how it compares with them. But I can tell you that if you want a thrill, if you want the biggest smile available for this kind of money, a GR Yaris is in a different league. It is so much more entertaining. Yes, it's a pint-sized car by comparison, has essentially no room in the back, and the boot is not great. Here, apparently, it's a lot bigger than the old car, but they've now put a false floor into it, so that sort of negates a lot of the advantage. And as you can probably tell, it's also used primarily as a dog wagon, in this case, a spaniel. Doberman owners probably get something a little bit bigger. I know what I just said about the Golf R, but I meant the Mark 7 or 7.5. The Mark 8 is never, ever going to have my recommendation, but I think I actually had more fun driving the Mark 8 GTI. I did. That's just not right. I mean, in theory, I like a fair few things about this. The seats are pretty decent. The steering wheel is nice. The paddles are good enough. The infotainment's all decent and everything, but it just doesn't come together at all. I've owned more BMWs than any other brand in my life. I think I am safe to call myself a BMW fan. Though the old 1 Series, the M140i and M135i had enough charm, I could get why people would buy them in spite of their faults. I'm struggling. I'm really struggling here. So, yeah. BMW M135i xDrive, thumbs down. BMW must try harder. In any case, I am extremely grateful to this car's owner Cameron for bringing it out, and as ever, to you for watching. So, don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.